afternoon, Amit.
Andrew, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good, very good. Good to see you.
Yeah, excellent. Good to see you too. Welcome to the Growth Show, everyone. We're now up to our 23rd episode. Those numbers keep going up, and we're still here every week. So and so are you guys out there as well. So thank you for continuing to join us. How's your week been?
It's been good actually. Yeah, busy kind of. We're well into Q4 now, right? So yeah. So it's definitely, you can definitely feel some of that. I don't know if it's kind of still end of year panic or if it's just kind of normal business. We're still trying to figure all of that out.
Yeah, I saw a pretty good meme about Halloween actually, where it was like some people are going to go and do some trick or treating. I think I'm just going to crack a bottle of red and start putting my Christmas decorations up.
Actually, it's quite funny. There's a house near me which has literally gone out all Christmas for Halloween.
Really?
And yeah, I mean, bearing in mind we're still kind of a few days away, but this is just people with maybe a lot of time on their hands at the moment, working from home, needing projects. So it's quite funny. I was like driving around, I almost had to do a double take. I was like, this is crazy. But it's cool.
Yeah.
How's your week been? All good?
Good. Yeah, busy. I think you said obviously there's a lot of movement at the moment as far as last quarter. So people are kind of trying to make things happen. I think trying to work through things. So and looking towards Q1 obviously, which we're going to be talking about 2021. So we're kind of on our third episode of the series. We did a 2021 series. We've covered sales, how that looks in 2021, how marketing looks in 2021, and kind of focus today is people and tech, right? That's kind of what we're leaning into. So just while kind of we see a few people dropping in, and hi to those people that are new, hello to people that have seen us before. If you've got any questions, jump them on the chat or Q&A, and we'll be happy to kind of get back to those during the show or kind of post-show as well. So yeah, people. I mean, that's what we're focusing on today, right?
Yeah, and honestly, it's funny actually because we've been, I guess when all of this started, I think the first sort of concern we had was about our people, I guess, right? More than anything else, it was our teams. It was like, how do we kind of react to what's going on, and it's funny that we're sort of 8 months on now, and a lot of people are still really kind of struggling with that. They're still, it's funny. I kind of even though you'd imagine now, kind of 2/3 of the way through the year in, people are still saying, well, we haven't quite figured out how to work remotely, and so I thought it'd be quite an important and interesting topic. And what's bizarre is normally when we kind of get together before the show to put some show notes together and kind of just figure out what we're going to be talking about, we spend quite a bit of time doing a bit of research just to make sure that obviously what we're talking about is very accurate. Obviously we talk about personal experiences and stuff, but what's bizarre is there's very little content that's actually out there from credible sources about employee strategy for 2021, people strategy. That's very unique. I mean, go back a couple of years, and if you look for 2019 or 2020, you'll see an influx and so many different sort of articles and advice pieces and all of those things. And yet for next year, honestly, very little content. I mean, I struggled to find anything that was kind of meaningful. But I think that really kind of summarizes where we are, right?
Yeah, it's challenge, right? I mean, whereas people previously had answers or purported to have answers, I don't know if anyone has all the, well, actually, no, I think no one has all the answers at the moment. It's a moving target continually. So, to kind of lock something down into concrete, as it were, it still has to be very fluid. But listen, we don't shy away from tough topics, right? So it's as there's no content out there at the moment, or very little. we'll hopefully add and put some clarity on some thoughts that we've had. And obviously, as you mentioned, there's some personal experiences that we've implemented over the last kind of 8-9 months here.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think let's try and tackle this. So yeah, looks there's quite a few more people have joined in. So thanks guys for joining. And like Andrew said earlier, in case you missed that, if you do have any questions, use the Q&A button or the chat function. We'll keep an eye on those throughout the show. So if you do have any other questions or any kind of points, like Andrew said, this is kind of like a very kind of fluid topic, right? I don't think there's any kind of right or wrong answers here. So if you do have a viewpoint, if you do have any kind of insights that you want to add to this, any experiences, then again, we'll be kind of very happy to kind of hear those.
And for those listening on the podcast, by all means, obviously, fire us an email, growthshow@digitalnexer.com. So if you want to add to the conversation as well, we'd be happy to kind of get that. We see our listenership kind of growing day by day at the moment. So there's a lot of people that clearly prefer to listen to us, Amit, than see us, which I'm not sure how to take that. I should take it as a positive.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get my head around that as well, but it's cool. All right, so let's get cracking then, Andrew. So yeah. So I think like always, we kind of look big picture and then kind of narrow back in, right? So yeah. I think if we look at sort of global trends, I think, although there's maybe a lack of content that's out there, there's not a lack of news regarding what companies are looking to do in 2021 in terms of managing sort of employees and sort of how that relates. So yeah, I think some global trends, Andrew, you've kind of highlighted some companies who've already kind of made very kind of bold announcements about how they're going to be kind of managing employees and things like that moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen, obviously, I mean, it appears that the kind of guys in the tech sector were the first ones to actively promote remote work and work from home strategies where possible. Obviously, we're not talking about things like manufacturing and some of those other tasks, but when we're looking at that, you've got just in the news this week, Dropbox have now kind of mentioned that, and also cloud solutions. For those of you who don't know, Dropbox have said that going forward, employees can just work from home full time. So they have a choice of hybrid or full time. Microsoft already come out and said something similar. Twitter have said something similar. So you're seeing kind of a lot of these tech companies now just making a bold decision. So it's not, what does this look like in 2021, where originally it was kind of, okay, we won't come back to the office till July, we won't come back to the office till December. Even the likes of like HubSpot, now they're kind of making bold decisions where it's pretty much, no, you know what, 2021, this is how it looks. You guys work where you want, right? And how you want.
Yeah, and I think it's important also to say that I think this isn't just a kind of work from the office versus a work from home scenario. So I think Microsoft also came out and said, look, you can work from home if that's what you want to do. But those kind of electing to do so, we do need to then revise, remuneration packages and all that kind of stuff as well. So exactly. So it's there's there's a little bit of kind of give and take, and I think we'll kind of discuss those elements, I think, moving forward as well.
Yeah. I think the thing is that it's as you mentioned, there's caveats associated to those bold statements. So they're not kind of the almost not throwaway, but comments previously was like, okay, guys, we're just going to temporarily do this. We're going to give you an allowance, to set yourself up. There's obviously now, proper things in place.
Yeah. Cool. So look, I think let's kind of, should we talk a little bit about ourselves? And I think let's kind of share the structure of the show with everyone today, Andrew, so people know what's coming. I think it also helps to keep us in line as well. So
just gone tangents. Yeah.
So I think what we're going to do, guys, is we'll share a little bit kind of insight in terms of what our experiences have been. Just in terms of, again, where it's been very kind of difficult to perhaps even forecast what our team wants to do. And I think what we'll do with that is we'll look at maybe some of the challenges that businesses face on the back of this. We also think that there's quite a few kind of benefits for companies who really kind of do embrace perhaps a kind of work from home movement, or kind of scenario. And that's, I think, especially with these kind of rising cases at the moment, which feels like everywhere kind of Middle East and the West, that perhaps people do really kind of need to think about maybe an overall 2021 strategy rather than just, again, like a short-term strategy, like you mentioned.
Month, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll look at some of the kind of benefits that we've identified and certainly share some of the ones that we've seen already firsthand. And what we'll also then do is look at it from an employee perspective as well. So we want to kind of look at the challenges that employees face with remote learning. This is also based on feedback that we've had from our team and from people that we've spoken to. In fact, all of these insights are from, essentially people that we've spoken to, right? So kind of very kind of real life stories and examples. And then we'll also, just to kind of balance it out, I think it makes sense to look at the benefits that employees have as well, right? Because it's not all doom and gloom from, in terms of working from home. And also working from home isn't a new thing, right? It's been going on for many, many years, right? Yes. Depending on where which part of the world you live in. But yeah, so we'll kind of we'll look at both sides of a fence as such. I think in terms of both from a corporate perspective as well as the employee side. But yeah, Andrew, do you want to kind of talk about maybe some of the challenges that we faced? I mean, we've been working from home since, I guess, the middle of March.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of, I guess, from that point onwards, I mean, there was obviously a bit of planning that went on before because we kind of figured out that this was going to happen. So just made sure that, we looked at, made sure that everybody was, fully connected at home and could work remotely. But I think you were sharing something with me earlier where we were talking about how we perhaps expected everybody to maybe even back in the office right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously, we joked when there was that initial kind of work from home activation, let's say, listen, guys, take what you need. It was quite amusing. The office did look like a bit of a supermarket sweep, people walking out with monitors and people walking out with chairs. So thankfully, we obviously let security know that it wasn't a land grab. It was kind of people trying to set themselves up. But I've got to be honest. I mean, I think, and obviously just bouncing around, I don't know if it was a thought in my head with the temperature drop here. So there's obviously a weather consideration where we currently are in this part of the world. It's incredibly hot, and in October that temperature starts to fall. You see traditionally, for example, you'd see a lot of people outside of the office space, in and around, people socializing, even on people on a cigarette break and things like that. So I kind of half expected more people to be back into our office, if not the building, if not just in some of these other kind of workspaces here. And it definitely hasn't been that. So from a kind of very real Nexa perspective, hardly anyone back in the office. And when I look around, and perhaps pop downstairs now, the coffee shop's got like a little table and chairs outside. You would never be able to get a seat there at lunch, back in the day. And now, I mean, you got, pick and choose where you want to sit, right? So I guess I kind of half expected people to kind of start coming back in, but that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I mean, and look, in the early days when we were sending out surveys and things like that to understand people's mindsets regarding this, I mean, the good majority of people actually turned around and said, "But look, as soon as the office is back open, I'm going to be coming back in," right? And they were very kind of clear messages. People had the option of remaining sort of confidential with that feedback, so we weren't ever going to hold anyone, against whatever they said. But I mean, that was a general kind of sentiment
Consensus.
that as soon as we're open, we're going to be back in the office, and we weren't really kind of forcing that agenda, because I think we'd actually seen that potentially there was, perhaps even more productivity going on with people kind of working from home, and we saw that
from home.
I'd say, pretty early on, right?
Yeah.
But I think Andrew, let's year. Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, I mean, moving into some of those challenges, I think we did feel, potentially productivity could be a challenge. And I think from a business perspective, that was one of the things that potentially kind of raised its head straight away, right? How productive are your kind of workforce going to be remotely when they're not seeing each other, when we're not seeing them, when their line managers are not seeing them? How productive are they really going to be?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think when we first looked at this, we also said, well, how productive really, if we look at productivity as a whole, how productive are people when they're at the office?
Yeah.
Right. And I think you've got to look at it like, a like for like. And
Yeah.
I think everyone knows that when I'm in the office, I get very little work done. Right. There always seems to be a kind of, a line of people just wanting to come and say hello and ask about different things. And it just gets very difficult to actually knuckle down and get some work done. And so from a productivity standpoint, I've always seen that, okay, potentially, working away from that office environment. And we talk about that coffee shop. If there was, a time I need to put my head down for 2 or 3 hours, I'd go down to the coffee shop rather than in the office, because I knew I wouldn't get disturbed. But I think that productivity issue still exists for a lot of companies. I mean, there's been 2 companies I've spoken to this week, and even though numbers are high, right? So they're increasing both in the UK, they're increasing in the UAE. I mean, numbers are like, not at comfortable levels at all. And yet people are still back in the office in many respects, the full workforce are back in the office. And they're like, well, it's because we're not productive at home. And actually there's more surprise now, I say, when they say to us, how are you guys, like, how are you coping with social distancing in the office? We're like, well, actually, I think Andrew's there today and nobody else is, so we're coping pretty well.
I'm starting to feel that I'm the only one here and everyone's not here. So perhaps if I am not here, perhaps everyone will come back. Perhaps I'm that deciding factor at the moment.
Yeah, but it's funny, right? I mean, I think we kind of, and look, part of the reasons why I think it works for us is because we've got employees, from our kind of various offices, and we've never really seen any challenges with that. And I think the other side of it is that we were obviously kind of embracers of technology, and we'll touch on that technology piece as well. But it was seemingly easier for us than I think it was for many. And like I said, there's still a lot of people who are still kind of struggling with that. I had a meeting yesterday with a big global company, and I was speaking to the Dubai office, and they're in the office, all of them. And they were saying that they just received an email from Global saying, why are you guys in the office? Get home, this is crazy. But they were saying, look, people aren't working. And again, a big sort of local company I had a meeting with last week, same sort of thing. And I think some of this comes down to cultural mindsets. Some of this comes down to different kind of, I don't know, when I'm at home, I don't work philosophies, which presents a challenge when you're kind of having to work from home. But I've heard that from multiple companies saying, well, we've got a team of people who literally will never take their laptops home. So when they're at home, they're at home. And so when they're at home for 3 months, they're actually at home for 3 months. And, we might not even hear, or they might not even reply, for an internal email, reply to an internal email for maybe 8 or 9 days sometimes. And for me, that was just kind of mind blowing. I think it was just,
that is not a world we live in.
No, and I think it does come down to, like I said, different sort of cultures and different kinds of mindsets. So
but I mean, as you said that, I mean, just one of the challenges is that visibility, right?
Yeah.
So people are used to physically kind of seeing their employees and their peers and their colleagues, and that is a challenge. That is a business challenge. Not for some organisation not being able to see the individual at their desk. In their mind is like, well, they're not working, right? And that's that kind of that mentality. I think it's been there generationally. So I think that it's tough for some individuals to kind of just flick that switch and say, oh, okay, yeah, no problem, because they jump on a Zoom call every half hour. That individual is kind of at the coalface, as it were.
Yeah, and also and look, the thing is with that kind of visibility, I think it is also that accessibility as well, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, if you have got people who may potentially switch off or work weird hours or whatever it is, I mean, perhaps having access to these people becomes more difficult, which presents challenges. I think one of the other challenges, again, we work with a lot of companies who really resisted working from home. I mean, to the point where until the government announced you've got to work from home, they were all, forcing all employees back in, into the office every day. But when I spoke to some of those company owners, they were saying, look, one of the challenges is I just need to have eyes on my business. Yeah. I've spent 20 years building this business, and I just need to have eyes on it. I need to know what's going on. I need to be able to kind of hear things going on in the background. I need to be able to see things. And I think that's obviously quite important, especially if you kind of, I guess, if you're relying on that to get a pulse of what's actually happening in the business. Or if that's suddenly taken away and you don't have the kind of tools to replace that, I think that becomes a challenge.
Scary. It's scary if you don't, as you said, if you don't have a mechanism to, other than kind of your gut feeling when you stand in front of the office in the morning with a cup of coffee, and kind of survey your land, as it were. It's a challenge to replace that feeling, right? If you're not, it's difficult. And I think that this kind of, you touched upon this smacks to kind of some of the cultural thing, the challenge of, building a culture with an organization or transferring that culture remotely. So, I think we have a strong cultural presence as an organization. I think people actually hit that culture when they come and visit our office. They kind of next a culture, and that can be somewhat of a challenge when you kind of migrate that across remotely, right? Some of it doesn't transfer, or it can be challenging.
Yeah, look, I think really, to summarize it, it's a very kind of the kind of environment that we've kind of prided ourselves on creating that, right? The office was a fun place to be, and when it wasn't, we could get a pulse of that and we could change things pretty quickly. If we felt, we'd ultimately, it would come down to basically a client who's just upset a few people. But it's funny how that would kind of spread, right? And you could spot it. You could spot that kind of atmosphere change straight away. And luckily, I think because we were there and in the office, we could get a sense for that and we could change things. Yeah. But from that cultural perspective, I think you're absolutely right, because I think if you've got a strong culture, if you've got an environment where you trust your employees, where you perhaps don't have crazy tall hierarchy, where basically management are accessible. I think that transition from kind of being in the office to home is a little bit easier, right? Very because because you're not having to, I don't know, it's weird. I mean, again, these companies I spoke to were kind of forcing employees to almost clock in every day on a call just to make sure that they were up and working, and it was like, and I think from our environment, I mean, we've always turned a blind eye just when people have rocked up a little bit later, knowing full well that, if we send them an email at 10 o'clock at night because something's urgent has just come up, they're going to respond, right? And I think, that's quite rare in that sense anyway, but just rare in the sense of, just having that kind of environment where everyone's kind of allowed to just get on with their own thing and no one's going to be, tracking every activity or whatever they're doing. I think it's, I think it does help.
Yeah, I think you mentioned there the key word is trust. So I think what we've been able to do is, in our scenario, whereas the challenge may have been some of this productivity, operationally, the visibility, some of these things that we've kind of spoken about, the key thing for us was trust. So, we've trusted in the past our employees to be sensible and to get their work done and work a bit extra if they need to, or clock off a bit early if they want to get out, and again, I think the transition for us was, based on that, right? I think organizations that had a very kind of strict structure, and kind of forced environment, have definitely, suffered from kind of the current situation for sure, or they just forced everyone back in. As you and I both know, there's, as you mentioned, there's got organizations that the moment the local authority said, yep, no problem, we'll get back to the office, it was kind of, there's no choice, you got to get back in, right?
Yeah, which was also the kind of, I think, which is the opposite of what I think we have. And that was, and look, in all fairness, for companies that forced everyone back in on that first day, we could have predicted which ones those were. right? Just knowing the mind, just knowing the mindsets of the people we work with, and I think that's a fair statement.
Yes.
And because you could, and it was like that. We'd be sent a meeting request, and you'd have to do a double take because they were saying this is a physical meeting, basically, when the government had essentially been forced to open up business, right? I mean, the threat was no less.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, no, I'm not coming in. I'll just like dial in. Yeah. And then what you see is a room full of people crammed in, wearing masks and just looking uncomfortable. And I'm just like, that's not the kind, for me, that's not really what, and look, at each their own, right? Whatever works for them, it's fine.
Yeah.
But I think from that cultural perspective, it's important to get that right. There's a couple of things here, though, Andrew, because one of the things that we've done is we've made a lot more kind of hires from a kind of remote workforce standpoint.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we saw one of our kind of first challenges, which was onboarding remote hires, right?
Yeah.
So these weren't people who are typically tied to an office in New York or an office in Manchester or anything like that. These were essentially, the best people for the job that was available, right? And we kind of decided, I'm trying to think when it was, but I think it was about sort of mid-May, beginning June, where we said, look, we really need to explore this a little bit more. Yeah. The talent pool is very limited in Dubai, as we know. So more often than not, we're forced to hire the best people locally versus the best people full stop, right? And what this allowed us to do was really kind of change that philosophy and say, okay, well, rather than just hire people locally and limit ourselves to that kind of limited talent pool, we need to be looking at a different kind of workforce. Because if we're all working from home, it makes no difference whether I'm in Cape Town or whether I'm in Dubai, right?
Exactly.
As long as I'm working, similar hours, maybe not even the same hours, but similar hours, perhaps that works. And I think the challenge we saw initially was, okay, hiring people, because you might come across someone who's exceptionally talented and seems like a really good fit for the job. But I think for the first time in probably a decade, we had to do a sales pitch on these guys to join us, right? And these were people at all levels, right? So and I remember that first one where obviously we're not well known in parts of the world that we're hiring from. We don't have offices or a presence, and it was really interesting because you could see the apprehension, and it was something very weird because it was like a deja vu moment of I don't know, 2007 or 2008 when we maybe just set up. Couple of years into the journey, and we were having to really do one of two things. I think one was either really kind of do an aggressive sort of sales pitch to that prospect, that employee, to get them to join us, or we just have to pay them more, right? And that was it. Honestly, that was it. It was like, okay, because you needed to kind of overcome that apprehension. And in those days, actually, we went down a lot of kind of overpaying people, because we needed top talent. And there were just much better options, alternatives to joining us at that time. And so it felt like we needed to work on that. But with the added advantage this time that instead of us being a team of 5 or 6, we were now a team of, 60, right? And so that helps because obviously there's a lot more people on LinkedIn. There's a lot more, so there's more kind of credibility. Obviously, people go on a website and see who we work with, and that obviously all helps. But still, there's still apprehension, and I really kind of noticed that. So what we did is we actually worked on a real kind of different onboarding strategy. We've got Samara, who's just like our kind of people superstar, and she looks after kind of anything people related in the business. And so together we kind of said, look, how do we kind of overcome this? We really looked at employer branding, I'd say probably for the first time. Because we said, look, actually, people are going to research us. And if our employer branding isn't correct, then actually we're going to miss out on some really good people. And these candidates are the kind of candidates we don't want to miss out on because they can really kind of take us to the next level. To the point where we all went for this sort of culminated in a big video shoot not so long ago now, right? A couple of months back. Which was essentially to create an employer brand video to really kind of get the culture of Nexa out there, to show why we're different, why we're worth maybe taking a gamble on, and I think that was but again, it was a challenge which we could potentially overcome. It's still never going to be the same. You're never going to be able to create 15 years of history in a new market. But as long as you can translate some of that across into a new market during that recruitment process, I think that was, I think that's kind of really important. So again, yeah, that onboarding of new employees, and in all fairness, I think we've done a really good job of the onboarding. And I guess the biggest, we're still very early on, but the biggest sort of, I guess, metric behind that is retention. We normally know pretty well. We normally know pretty quickly whether we've made a good hire or not. And obviously the challenge is we're not seeing these guys face to face, but the new people that we've brought on, and there's been close to 20 now. I've been very happy with I'd say the level of candidate we've brought on, and also how they've settled in. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, as you said there, it's one of the things, in all honesty, when we've been hiring in the past, is just the energy. When people come into the office or the different offices around the world and kind of feel that vibe and feel that energy, and when you don't obviously have that physical kind of one-to-one connection, it's all about, as you mentioned, kind of building that credibility, you're building that presence. For a different type of audience. As much as we've spent a lot of time building content, growing the brand from a prospecting perspective to work with clients. Equally, the same amount of effort has been put into Nexa as a brand as well.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I agree. So look, I think we can talk about technology, but I'm thinking perhaps we leave that to the end. I think there's one more challenge, Andrew, that I think we need to talk about before we move on to benefits.
Yeah.
And I think that challenge was cost.
Yeah.
Right. So I think, I'd say a technology cost anyway, in terms of new tools that people needed to kind of subscribe to, new equipment, perhaps. I know we've had, almost like a record number of laptops that have had to be replaced in the last few months. There's been all sorts of things like that. And obviously I think there's potential opportunity costs as well, because we're paying for this nice office for one at the moment. You've probably got the largest executive office in the world at the moment, right? In terms of the office for one.
Yeah, it's old Andrew status. Yeah, it's a pretty good space. I kind of, although creature of habit, I've kind of tucked myself away in a corner, pretty much the same spot every day. So it's only for our studio, for the kind of the growth show studio that I tend to move out on a weekly basis.
Yeah, it's funny, but I guess those are kind of the challenges, and I think we spoke about this earlier. And I'm not sure how relevant it is, but I think when we were kind of looking at this again, just from a kind of sort of strategic perspective for the business, I think there's a lot of companies out there right now who understand that things are going to have to change, right? I think there's a lot of people who really kind of get that. Okay, look, in an ideal world, while the threat still exists and very much kind of impacts us all, we should be working from home, right? We should be sort of creating as safe an environment as possible. But the challenge is people have just invested in really expensive offices and canteens and
for long leases as well, for 5-10 year even ownership. I know 2 people in this building that own their office space, so to a certain extent, okay, it's an asset, but at the moment it's an asset that's just sitting empty,
right? And depreciating quickly as well, right?
Exactly.
And this is so I kind when we spoke about this, we kind of agreed that there's a lot of people that do want to kind of do things differently, but just can't, right? Just because they're tied into all of these agreements. And so I almost feel as if the impact of COVID, the impact of working from home, I think some of those challenges, and I think some of these costs, I get the feeling once people are in a position that they can start to save some of these costs, I think that's where we'll see almost like in a second phase of remote working, right? And I feel as if, for example, we've spoken about converting the office into a more sort of collaborative area. you know, and things like that. And again, we'll talk about that in a second. But I mean, you know, there's so much more that you can do once you're kind of out of these crazy contracts that are all tied into, which is literally, you know, wasted money at the moment. So
yeah, exactly.
right. So yeah, but Andrew, let's move on to the benefits, because I think, you know, again, I think we're one of those companies that have really kind of embraced this.
Yeah,
You know, we've said, okay, look, if this is what it's like, let's not look at this for the short term. Let's kind of see if this is something that potentially works for the long term. I guess in many respects, our hand was forced because none of our employees bothered coming back to the office when we said, hey, guys, the office is open. They were like, all right, cool. Can we just work from home?
And
so, you know, so I guess, yeah. So yeah, when I say that we've embraced it, I think we've had a little nudge along the way.
crowbarred into it.
But like I said, I think, you know, one of those kind of benefits is, you know, again, you can rework those physical spaces, like what I just said, you know, in terms of the offices.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, having those collaborative rooms. We've spoken about having Zoom rooms, right?
Yeah.
So for example, having in our office, you know, there's kind of open plan areas. I think there's 2 doors in the office, which is for our kind of conference rooms, and which is great, except when you've got someone like Andrew on a conference call, and Andrew's quite loud. But when he's on a conference call, I mean, like literally the whole office can hear everything. So I think the challenge is obviously it's not conducive to the modern way of working, purely because of you know, because of how it is, right? So we've got to basically you know, think about repurposing that, adding those kind of, you know, maybe Zoom cubicles, you know, those kinds of areas, and then really kind of maybe not using that office as a come to your desk every day, sit there for 8 hours, and then go home place, but it's a cool, let's create almost like that brainstorming you know, place where you can go in and you can basically, you know, collaborate, be creative if you need to for a project, maybe for a couple of hours in the day, and that's it. And then the other thing that we've spoken about is obviously, like you guys have seen, we produce kind of lots and lots of content. You know, so even if it's a case of creating a podcast studio, maybe a you know, kind of video studio. I mean, again, we've got all of that space in the office potentially. But again, it's kind of just, you know, starting from kind of like, I don't know, a blank floor plan almost. And,
because, you know, obviously in our case and a lot of other kind of, you know, individuals, that workspace looks very different right now how it was before. As you said, you know, the comfort level of coming in and sitting at a desk, or, you know, a meeting room that you probably would have, you know, easily got 10 people in now. There's a comfort level of 4 to 5. You know, and that's just individuals themselves, obviously, you know, making sure that you're kind of practicing social distancing, and I don't, you know, and that's not something that goes away overnight. As we spoke about last week, even if there's a vaccine and there's a comfort level again, people are still going to be nervous, because just people are more aware of their surroundings and how close they are to individuals now, and, you know, social distancing that we have never really thought about. So I think, the benefit of this is being able to, as you said, you know, almost have a blank sheet in front of you and say, well, like, well, what do I really want to do in this space? You know, what is it? What is it? Is it, as you said, you know, a place to collaborate? Is it a place for privacy? So you've got those Zoom rooms that you can kind of just jump on and have those personal conversations, because again, they're not going away anytime soon. Yeah. You know, the shift has been dramatic in that sense. So what does that look like? You know, and ultimately potentially even looking at, you know, saving costs with this, right? You know, as far as just sheer space, you know, yes, you need space for more things, but ultimately if you put, you know, 40, 100 people in a room at a desk, even an open plan office, you still need space. We spoke about boiler rooms, you know, old school sales boiler rooms. Yeah. You know, I don't know if you ever went to ITP back in the day here, and it was proper boiler room stuff. It's kind of like 200 people on the phones, you know, all crammed in their desk, you know, rabbit hutch style. It's just not going to happen again. So how does that look now? You know, is it a quarter of the space, but an open plan kitchen with, you know, a few sofas and casual seating space, you know, a couple of Zoom rooms, right?
Yeah. No, I think so, and yeah, so I think that's going to be interesting. But I think the challenge with that as well is, like, if people are saving costs, And again, we've just obviously gone through our kind of budgeting for next year. You know, we don't know if we're going to still be able to save costs on our office next year. We're yet to have that conversation. I was just checking that the landlord wasn't watching. But basically, you know, this is something that, you know, it's a conversation that we're going to have.
Yeah.
But in our budget, so, you know, but essentially what we've kind of earmarked is whatever savings that we make from the office, we kind of put that into more kind of team building events, right?
Yeah.
And try to kind of bring that you know, that team closer. Even though now, I mean, we've got employees in probably 10 different countries, and
Yeah.
you know, so it's obviously more kind of difficult to navigate around that. But I'm pretty sure there's still a lot more that we can do from a kind of, you know, I don't know, whether it's kind of team activities or whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
And hopefully even potentially flying everyone into Dubai for a nice weekend if they're, you know, if they're kind of located outside. So, you know, I think this is what
it might be better flying to South Africa, go Sun City or something. I think let's do that. Let's do it the other way around.
Yeah.
New York.
We
should be able to get a cheap hotel room in New York at the moment. People are fleeing that place, so we should be able to get over there now.
Brilliant.
But yeah, no, I mean, you kind of said that. I mean, that is again one of those other benefits, right? I think there is ourselves included. We really focused on, you know, regional or local hire for many years, and what this does is it's opened up kind of that global workforce, right? I think one of the things when you and I were kind of bouncing through some notes didn't consider is the fact that people actually are stuck in their country in some cases and were stuck there for large periods of time. So there was actually a forced kind of repatriation that happened that ultimately was out of their control as well. So, you know, it's definitely opened up the opportunity to a global workforce in our industry, and I think in other industries, clients are more accepting of this type of relationship. You know, a kind of digital Zoom only relationship as opposed to a physical meeting, coffee, you know, restaurant, whatever the case may be, actually visiting them in their location or their country. So it's definitely opened our eyes, and I think a lot of other individuals, to the fact that, you know, globally now, you know, that workforce is accessible. And obviously, you know, in line with that, when you've got a global workforce, I mean, you start to open up some of the other benefits that we've seen, where you've got a 7-day working week, right?
Yeah.
You know, in other parts of the world, because obviously down here it's a Sunday to Thursday, but now through kind of remote hiring, we've started to tap into that, right?
Yeah, and exactly. And Fridays for our kind of, you know, clients elsewhere was always very limited in terms of what we could do. The benefit or trade-off to that is if they'd send us something to do on a Friday night, the fact that we had an army of people working on a Sunday just meant that everything was done by the time they went back to the office on a Monday. But the fact now, I think in 6 of the countries that we've hired from now, we've got people who are now working on a Friday, which is great, because I think we've now got, you know, more than a dozen people that are kind of operating on Friday hours as well. And we have got genuinely kind of close, you know, full kind of 6 days a week service that's going on. I think what's interesting, and I think the next phase of this is, okay, well, how do we kind of convert that to possibly 6.5 days a week? And it's not necessarily doing a half day on a Saturday. It's not kind of what I mean, but more in the sense of, again, using those time differences. So obviously there's, you know, people kind of 12 hours behind us, and there's people 12 hours ahead of us. And again, just making sort of hires in you know, in that respect can, again, just increase our sort of coverage, and just, you know, A, make us more accessible to clients who perhaps would be worried about us not operating on a Friday. You know, but B, actually just means that we've just got people potentially working around the clock, in their own hours, in their own time zones. And as long as I think we've got the right sort of technology in place to support that, I don't see that as an issue at all. So yeah, I'm actually pretty excited about that side of this movement, I guess.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, like you said, that accessibility has grown tremendously. I know that I got a friend of mine. His wife works in a call center, and even she's working from home. So they upgraded their home package. They've set up a VoIP system in the home, and you know, effectively, she's now in a remote call center in the study in her home. You know, and she's working some kind of different hours at the moment because it's just easier, right? You know, because it's now from home, there's not an hour and a half commute into the office. So, you know, saving 3 hours a day allows them to do that. But I guess we're going to be talking about employee benefits and challenges kind of next, right?
Yeah, let's go into that actually. I think so if we look at kind of the challenges from an employee perspective,
Yeah.
it was interesting. I think it was basically a lady called Liz Capant, who we work with in New York, and she came. You know, I've been in touch with her obviously regularly during the start of COVID, and her focus is very much kind of in recruitment. And you know, I think we were just having a general chat, and she said to me, "Look, I'm getting a lot of people coming up to me just asking advice about how they can stay relevant inside of their companies." And then we started looking into this. So we actually started interviewing a couple of people, and that was one of the kind of key points to this, because I think one of the challenges with employees is that kind of out of sight, out of mind scenario, right? You know, and we've seen this in the past. Dubai's like incredibly cutthroat. If any of you guys have kind of ever worked here, but you know, in the kind of dark days of sort of '09 over here, you know, if someone was away for 2 weeks and the company didn't miss them, genuinely people would be asking, do we need that person? Because look, they've been away for the last 2 weeks. And people used to get fired like via SMS, you know, on the last day of their holiday, and saying, look, you know, kind of, we've not really missed you, we've not really needed you, so perhaps we don't need you. And, you know, if you want to stay at home, maybe stay at home. But you know, that, you know, and obviously Dubai's kind of crazy extreme for things like that. But in terms of you know, but that kind of out of sight, out of mind scenario does very much exist, right? And there's a lot of people who we know who come to the office, don't make any noise, sit down, do their work all day, go home, and they do a brilliant job. But you know, people who aren't maybe as vocal, as confident to kind of, you know, talk on our weekly Zoom calls or whatever we do. I mean, you know, I can see a challenge for people like that, right? And from the introverts in that respect.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, you know, it's a challenge, as you said, look, out of sight, out of mind. So I think that is one of the challenges, you know, when you don't perhaps, I don't know, bump into your manager or bump into your boss or whatever, you know, on just a casual basis in the office environment, or you're collaborating on a bit of work. You know, you got to make sure that staying relevant is important, you know, and I think you know, that's a big thing, right? Just making sure you're still visible. But I mean, you know, kind of banging on with these challenges, I think one of the things that we've been genuinely amazed at is the lack of kind of corporate transparency. You know, we've day one fired out a questionnaire. We're thinking about doing this. What do you think? We want your feedback, want your interaction. We've jumped on Zoom calls from day one, kind of top and tail the week. We've, you know, shown numbers. We've been honest about wins and losses and pain and celebration. And then you kind of have conversations with friends, colleagues, etc. elsewhere, and a lot of employees are just kept in the dark, right? Completely. There's no visibility.
Yeah, look, I think part of that is, again, one of the things that we realized early on is that there's going to be so much uncertainty. I think especially, again, on a local level, we saw so many people losing their jobs. You know, literally within 2 weeks of COVID hitting, the amount of people that had lost jobs, and we're talking about large companies, obviously, you know, high-profile employers like Emirates, you know, having multiple rounds of cuts, and that uncertainty, I think, becomes really scary because, again, this goes back and links into productivity. It goes into company, you know, employees feeling important. And so much of that comes from stability. And if you don't have that in place, it doesn't work. And I think, you know, we've done things prior to that, probably not the best, but we were kind of finding our feet with it. But, you know, we introduced things like open book management, you know, which was a case of, look, let's open our numbers up to the whole company. Let's see. So everyone potentially has access to what's going on from revenues, from a cost perspective. You know, so they can see how the company's performing. And I think the only thing that we did, because we realized that actually, you know, uncertainty, and doubt can actually create more problems for the business. Especially if employees have been looking for new jobs because they don't feel comfortable or confident in the company's ability to survive. We felt that would be an issue. So again, what we did is we doubled down on the open book management. So rather than this being almost like a monthly report that was produced, this just turned into a live weekly run through of our numbers every single Thursday, right? Without fail. And we've done that pretty much from week one of COVID, where we sat there and said, hey guys, in the early days, it was very much a case of, look, here's the clients who've now put contracts on hold because they can't operate. But however, here's some that we've won. Here are the numbers. Here's the revenue that's tied to that. Here's kind of how much profit we've made, or how much kind of losses we've incurred, whatever that looks like for those months. But I think what I did is that allowed, I guess, the employees to really kind of understand which direction the business was heading in. Very, very kind of clear and knowledgeable about our monthly targets, because we broke down our annual budgets and said, look, this is exactly what we need to achieve to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And I think the general feeling is people have kind of invested in that approach, and we've seen it where we've been maybe short of budget, by whatever that figure was, with a week to go, and suddenly sales started flying in from anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Employees across the board started looking for new revenue opportunities and upselling to clients, and that was actually very overwhelming, because normally it's down to say 4 or 5 of us to kind of bring in revenue, and then all of a sudden there was another 10 people who were literally saying, hey, here's an opportunity, I've identified this, I think there's a quick win here, and actually that month where we were quite a little bit short, we ended up 20% over, and it was ridiculous. I mean, I've never seen a month like that in 15 years. So, so I think, but that all stems from that transparency and from really kind of opening up, and in some respects, Andrew, exposing ourselves, right? Because we're basically, we've been able to kind of come through this positively, but the opposite could have happened, where we basically could have really struggled through this, like really, really struggled through this. Where actually we're in some, if you're not showing your numbers, you could probably hide it and kind of promote false confidence. But the fact we were showing our numbers might have just told people, okay, right, this is a sinking ship, guys. We just need to get off it as soon as possible. So it's kind of swings and balances. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the thing is, I mean, obviously, it's not. I think there just has to be some element of transparency or communication with employees. So I think the thing is, obviously, potentially we went to an extreme of an overshare, which worked out well. But even just an understanding of operationally what's happening, from an employee perspective. I think that we've seen it a lot where there's been a lack of sharing and almost closed ranks, right? And I think in those early days as well, kind of rumor mill was rife, right? That's the other thing. And social media and WhatsApp, contributes to that rumor mill. And there was a rumor mill around, COVID and the whole situation, that kind of almost spilled over to daily life. And I think, where employers or companies were not able to, kind of just be honest and transparent on what was going on, that contributed, I think, to ultimately some of their downfall. And kind of, some of the negative association to that activity. So, but I think, that transparency comes into it. But I guess the thing is, I mean, also, if we kind of want to get, a bit kind of touchy-feely, let's say, from an employee perspective as well, I think that one of the challenges is just that, collaboration, some of the friendship circles, some of the bonds, those physical and emotional connections that you have with your peers, right? When you see them every day, or they're, as you mentioned, they're away on holiday for a couple of weeks, they come back, they share stories, birthday celebrations. We used to have great kind of birthday celebrations, lunches. All of these things are also challenging from an employee perspective as well. And I think Thomas has just made a good point on that as far as.
Yeah, we've also seen actually we've seen pairs and groups of people arranging to come to the office on the same day and stuff like that, because they just miss each other, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So when and there's been days where people say, right, on every Tuesday we go in, and it's the same set of people that go in because they miss those kind of physical connections. And I think, that's certainly one of those challenges. People need to talk to people, right?
Yeah,
And I think
exactly.
when you're stuck at home, potentially that becomes more challenging. But one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, Andrew, is that kind of work-life balance, because I feel as if we're kind of, people are learning still, right? I mean, I kind of look at this um, and from a personal perspective, I felt as if first few months I had a good balance. I felt like I was working harder than ever, which was fine. But the fact that I wasn't spending an hour commuting each way or whatever it was, and spending hours on the road just meant I was being much more productive. I would say recently I'm feeling as if my work-life balance is everywhere. So for example, I've now conditioned myself to get up on a Saturday and work for 10 hours just to make my Sunday easier. And and did it without thinking about it, and then realized that I'm being stupid. So it's kind of like trying to figure stuff like that out, right? Because genuinely, and I think it's difficult because you haven't got that kind of divide now. You just get up like you're doing a normal day, get into the office and start working, right? And the fact that we don't have to jump in a car to do that.
Yeah, I think the lines have been even more blurred than before. I think, obviously everyone has a different mindset. So I think even, when you weren't the owner of Nexa and you weren't the CEO of Nexa, your mentality was to just work like that anyway. So I think it's kind of, it's a challenge almost to the point of, when you enjoy your work so much, it's not really a work-life balance, right? Work is life and life is work. So I think it's different for different people. From an employee perspective, I think it is more of a challenge, as you said, when you are at home, and perhaps traditionally people did have that divide, right? Where I would leave my laptop on the desk and I would disappear. I mean, I kind of I know a few of these people, and it still just blows me away. It'd be I know I'm checking emails now at 7 o'clock at night, and I kind of almost want to scream at them, because that's been my life as long as I've remembered it. But I think the thing is, it's definitely affected people differently, because there isn't that kind of structural, I get in a car or I get on the metro and I head into the office and then that's my work. And then here we go Saturday, or here we go Friday or Sunday, it's the weekend, yeehaw. Let me do that activity. So I think, it's definitely a challenge.
Thomas has highlighted why I do this, because he says, like, to create a work-life balance, one must first have a life. So I think he's absolutely nailed it there. So thanks, Thomas, for highlighting that. Andrew, should we move on to some the benefits for for employees from kind of work home, because I think it's important. And then what we'll do at the end, guys, we'll just touch on some of the technology that I think has had a really kind of big impact for us, and I think it's important to share that. So look, I think one of the kind of employee benefits is working from anywhere, right, Andrew? I mean, just that ability now where you can be working from home, but alternatively, you could be working from pretty much anywhere and still putting in a shift, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, I think the amazing thing is now that there is that dynamic flexibility, right? That kind of dream life that people have kind of been pushing out on social media, especially, or quite aggressively over the last couple of years. Now it's a real scenario for some people. You don't have to be tied to a desk. You don't actually have to be tied to a physical geographical location. We've had employees of our own that have relocated, right? They've repatriated in some cases, and they've relocated in others. So that opportunity does exist now, where potentially you could look to work from anywhere. I mean, even the tourism board here in Dubai has just recently pushed something out saying, listen, you can work anywhere in the world, why not work here? And they kind of issued a special work remote license even. To target that opportunity. So I think that's a huge plus for a lot of people. the ability to, effectively have that flexibility, right, to work from anywhere. And it could be you get up in the morning, like you said, I think you were in a coffee shop yesterday, right? Just popped into a coffee shop for a couple of hours. It may be, I've definitely worked from a bar while this has been going on. Do you want to work on the beach, work from the beach, wherever you want, right? It's up to you guys.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that comes down to just, making sure you're organized and structured and things like that. I think it works fine.
Yeah, not drunk. Like, obviously, when I said a bar, I wasn't drinking. It was just, that environment.
I think one of the other things, Andrew, moving quick, swiftly on from that, is just that ability to stand out, right? Because I think it's been funny because I think what we go into the same office with, like I said, 50, 60 people every day. And sometimes it's very difficult to find out who those kind of real stars are, right? The guys that, because there's a lot of kind of teamwork, there's a lot of collaboration, there's a lot of that kind of stuff. But I think what I've quite enjoyed is having a lot more sort of contact with people in the team that I ordinarily wouldn't have. And I think it's kind of almost like that accessibility to management that exists today. Because essentially now we're just at the end of a Slack message or a Zoom call, right? Whereas, before it's like, okay, you can't stick my head around a corner, is I'm in a meeting, and genuinely you just wouldn't get a chance to speak to, just have a general chat with people, a 5 or 10 minutes chat, which, for whatever reason, we just didn't, unless it was around like the water cooler or, in the kitchen or whatever it is, you just don't have that. And I think now you've got, employees have got a much kind of better way and a more accessible way to, to kind of reach senior people. And again, I think it is important for them to kind of stay vital and for them to stand out. And I think, the smarter employees are the ones who are really kind of taking advantage of that as well.
Yeah. It's just so much easier, as you mentioned, to grab 5-10 minutes and just kind of gain access to people. We should start a Apple for Teacher Slack channel. Where people can jump on and kind of coordinate with seniors. But yeah, no, there's definitely that. I think also, back from a personal perspective, I think cost saving has kind of benefited a lot of people. So, where they haven't had to spend money on things like gas, petrol, public transportation, I know that this office and this building was kind of the, Deliveroo central, or as food delivery, and there was definitely a lot of money that was being spent. We had dedicated Slack channels to lunchtime food, so I think as much as that's hit Deliveroo, I think that's benefited obviously people to be able to bring their own lunch or have their own snacks, or just kind of save a bit of money in transportation and food as well.
No, 100%, and I think that's when you start to kind of save that money, because it isn't just about getting to work and fuel and stuff like that. Then there's car parking costs and there's a whole load of stuff, right? And actually, when you start to add that up, and I, as one of our team I was talking to, and he was saying, look, it goes, the amount of money I'm saving by not coming into the office, it's really kind of working out, pretty well. So I guess this is where we're going back to that first point. It's why Microsoft's saying, hold on. Perhaps we need to look at your salary packages if you want to continue working from home. But
true.
anyway,
I think that's the thing. I mean, there's a consideration. There's always a consideration associated to that, right? There's a consideration, and that's laid out when kind of employees are taken on. Look, I mean, I think the thing is, at the end of the day, from an employee perspective, I think you effectively just can be your master of your own destiny, as it were. So, you're not bound by heading into the office, sitting at the same desk, same position, doing the same thing, routine. You can pretty much, operate how you want, even down to things like, I mean, it's quite comical. Obviously, we see, people's pets kind of, jumping around. I mean, even things like that, there's, you've got kind of pets now, right? That previously probably needed some help or needed someone to walk them or kind of take care of them. And obviously now you've got an opportunity to spend a bit more time with them, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. Andrew, we're just over that kind of 1 minute past mark. Should we kind of just talk about some of the technology that we've been using?
Definitely.
Look, I think there's no point going into any of, I think, the video conferencing side of it, because I think everyone knows that we've been kind of using Zoom for pretty much everything.
Yeah, exactly.
But let's talk about digital contracts. So what technology, Andrew, have we been using and why?
Yeah, we've kind of used PandaDocs. So there's a digital signature functionality in there, allows you to upload signatures, stamps, etc., trade licenses, documentation that needs to be associated to that. I mean, I think digital documents are kind of more prevalent in Europe and the States, but obviously here in the Middle East, it was still print out, stamp, 1,500 copies. So we've managed to migrate successfully to that environment. And there's other obviously tools like DocuSign and kind of different documentation online. But from a contracting perspective, we're using that. We're using that for our proposals. It's cloud-based, it's app-based, and essentially allows you. I think what I should say is that when we roll through this technology, the great thing about all of the technology that we're using is accessible from your phone, right? So even if you were, let's say leaning harder towards that work versus life balance, whatever you're doing, if you're on the beach, you still have the ability to be contactable and communicate effectively.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think, look, sorry guys, just as a kind of bridge to why we're talking about technology pieces, early on in the show, because I know a few people have joined since, technology has been that reason why I think we've just been able to work so seamlessly from home. And I think that, and that's why, because we things like PandaDoc, for example, we were already using for digital proposals.
Yes.
So it wasn't new technology. It wasn't something that we needed to kind of implement from scratch. It was already kind of something that we did. And I guess the only thing that we've added to that is just getting people to sign those digital proposals with digital signatures,
exactly.
Which has made that whole process really kind of seamless. Internal comms, Andrew?
Yeah, Slack. I think we were pretty early on the Slack movement. I think that may be our exposure to the States. So obviously, you and I and the guys used to head over there to kind of different various conferences. We've seen the guys speak. Kind of one of the co-founders, to Slack. I think at Inbound 4 or 5 years ago, and we were keen to adopt that. We obviously were using that as an internal messaging collaboration tool, but we obviously moved to the paid environment. A few months ago now to access other capabilities of that. And what I would say is that that's now being used more effectively with other activities that we're using. So, I think you were testing out a voice functionality the other day where you can receive voice notes. Some of the best integrations on Slack is the wildly amusing Giphy integration, where you can kind of throw out random GIFs just for a bit of comedy. But some of the Zoom integration into that, the Google Calendar integration, these integrations where you can effectively use use Slack as a collaborative workspace, not just internal comms, but effectively a collaborative workspace.
Yeah, and the main thing is it just reduces internal emails.
Yes,
right,
100%.
Because again, email fatigue. I now check emails maybe 3 or 4 times a day versus kind of 3 or 4 times an hour. Just because of Slack, right? So those internal messages and always internal emails that used to come in where I'd be copied in for kind of no reason. I mean, all of those now are in Slack, which is great. So, so it's a massive time changer, and great product. I should declare, I guess, that I've got shares in Slack, right?
Amazing.
Just in case I get pulled up on it next time.
Do you want to talk about Zoom then? Zoom and HubSpot and
that's a good point.
You just want to perhaps next week you just share your portfolio. Just be one of these guys in Altero. I'm up 1.2% this week.
That'd be terrible. All right, and then I guess the last one, Andrew.
Yeah, go on.
Don't ask me about that portfolio.
Okay.
All right. The last one I was going to say is just from a task management perspective, because I guess this is the last piece of the jigsaw for us, right?
Yeah.
We were using 2 tools. One was a tool called Forecast, And another tool was a tool called Harvest. And Forecast, again, the way that we operate is very much everyone manages their own time. And Forecast was just a kind of time management tool, which allowed, so if everyone knows what they've got to do in a week, this tool would just allow them to kind of schedule in exactly which tasks they were working on during a week, right? And then for those accounts, we've got a few accounts where we get nervous about much more resources going in than what a client's willing to pay. We used a tool called Harvest, which was a time tracking tool. And again, not used for all accounts and not used by all team members, but one that certainly helped specific accounts, especially when it comes to sort of creative and things like that, which are very kind of subjective. So what we've done very recently is use the tool called ClickUp. And Andrew, you can tell us about ClickUp?
Yeah. I mean, it's I'd say I'd describe it as a wildly visual and highly customizable project management tool, and obviously task modulator, and kind of what I like about it is just the to be honest with you, taking a kind of dive into it in the last week, because it's been relatively new that we've started onboarding, we've started adding new clients. There's client collaboration, which is great. So you can give access to your client so they can see in real time what's happening. But for me, it's just about the ability to pick and choose, how you use it from a very personal perspective. So things like, customizing your board view, looking at what projects you'll be involved in, getting alerts. There's a fantastic app associated to it as well. So I think what's nice is in a relatively short space of time, it gives you a nice broad overview of kind of what's happening, right, in one place. And that's a challenge, obviously, when you've got, whatever, 40, 50 clients on the go, trying to even go through different Slack channels or different departments to understand what's happening. It gives you a real good kind of snapshot. And ultimately, look, clients are enjoying it because it does give them, a sense of control, right? And visibility and transparency. So giving them access to ClickUp, they can see what's happening in real time, who's responsible for it from their side, our side. So I like the collaboration side as well.
Yeah, it's really good. So guys, I mean, if you're wanting to kind of look at any kind of task management tool, that's super comprehensive. And again, a lot of these tools are very very cost effective. So you're talking, anywhere from sort of $4 to $10 per month per tool. So it's a very kind of affordable. And it's funny, I mean, like we've kind of moved on and evolved, and you're using these kinds of tools. I probably shouldn't say this because I don't know if she's listening, but my wife's company, which are a global, listed company. I mean, literally everything is done on email, and I just laugh at her. I was like, it's just crazy. I don't know how you operate, and it is literally just emails and keyboard warriors and all sorts of stuff like
Excel
that.
sheets,
it's like, you just don't get that.
Yeah,
you just don't get that with Slack, and it's kind of and especially with things like ClickUp and stuff, it's just so much better, so much better.
Oh, look, I think a ringing endorsement for ClickUp is anybody who knows me, me championing it and celebrating it, and Amit even giving me the ability to talk about it, I think shows how wildly practical that platform is. So a bit of an in-joke if you know me, but as far as organisationally, it's a challenge sometimes. So yeah, for me to champion this, I think says it all.
Yeah, I'm almost as surprised at myself for doing that, mate, to be honest with you. But no, it's cool. There's a few people that do know you on there, guys. We're over time as normal, but yeah. Look, I think if you guys have any questions, this is obviously quite a big topic. So if you do have any questions, guys, feel free to reach out to us. So through the website, through what is it? Growth show at
digitalnexer.com. Drop us an email. Jump on the socials. I mean, obviously all of our socials at Digital Nexer, and myself and Amit are obviously active on LinkedIn. So if you want to kind of reach out to us and and kind of give us a shout on there, by all means do that as well.
Sure. And a couple of other things. So Andrew mentioned the podcast earlier. So again, Digital Growth Show. I think we're on all the platforms, all major platforms at least. Actually, our numbers are really encouraging on there. It's huge, and it's getting even better. So guys, if you do get bored of seeing mine and Andrew's faces, then just feel free to just subscribe to the podcast. We're good with that. And then the second thing, you may have received emails because we send quite a lot of these out nowadays, but we launched a Growth Show magazine yesterday. And if you haven't received an email, let us know. If you have received an email, have a look at it. You can browse through the first issue without subscribing. But if you do subscribe, that would be very nice. And then also, if you wanted to contribute to that, I'd love to hear from you. So if you wanted to work with us to maybe develop an article, perhaps an interview, perhaps a story, whatever it is that you think may be interesting, let us know as well. And we're already we've had a few hundred subscribers for that already, which I'm really excited about and nervous about at the same time. But it's cool. I'm quite. Yeah, it's I think
we have to start a Dear Deirdre or a Mystic Meg section to the magazine. I think that would be good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, so guys, trying any way you want to contribute, feel free to do so. And also, we are looking at potentially launching another couple of different podcasts and shows. And again, any ideas or any suggestions you have for that, feel free to share those with me and Andrew. We're very open to any good suggestions for that. I think that's it.
Perfect. Good stuff. Yep. I think this may be a record time for our growth show, but obviously, I think we knew it was going to go a tad over because we're talking about people, and I think the importance of people was always there, but now more so than ever, I think people are starting to realise that this should be at the forefront and top of mind. So yeah. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you everyone for listening. Please go and subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our podcast, obviously give it a listen and give it a share as well while you're on there. So Amit, I think look forward to next week. I'll catch up with you then. Bye everyone.
All right, cool. Thanks guys. Take care.